She found the receipt that changed everything. The night I stopped protecting a man who never protected me. My mother said it like she was complimenting the centerpiece. "Isn't it wonderful," she told the whole table, "that someone finally wanted our Claire?" 40 people, my baby shower, and the room just kept moving. People laughed, clinked their sparkling cider, reached for another deviled egg. My husband Marcus looked at me from across the table. He didn't laugh. He was the only one in the room who didn't. That moment, right there. That's where this story ends, but it starts a long time before that. It starts with a woman named Barbara Elaine Sutton, who goes by Barb, who raised me in a 3-bedroom house in Naperville, Illinois, and who spent the better part of 31 years making sure I understood in small and careful ways that I was somehow less. I'm Claire Sutton Marsh. I'm 31 years old, I'm a licensed CPA, and until 14 months ago, I thought I was the problem. Before I go any further, if this story is resonating with you, please take a second to like and subscribe. Drop your city and what time it is where you are in the comments below. It genuinely helps more than you know. Now, let me take you back. My mother, Barbara Sutton, was the kind of woman who made everything look effortless. The house was always clean. The casseroles were always warm. She volunteered at the school library every third Thursday, showed up to every soccer game with a folding chair and a smile, and sent thank you notes within 48 hours of receiving a gift. From the outside, she was the gold standard. Inside our house, though, things had a different kind of order. My mother didn't yell, she didn't throw things, she didn't do any of the things you could point to later and say, that was the moment. What she did was quieter than that. She had this way of sighing, not dramatically, just a small exhale barely audible whenever I walked into a room, like my presence was a mild inconvenience she'd learned to tolerate gracefully. I was 7 the first time I noticed it, really noticed it. I'd drawn a picture of our family at school, crayon, purple sky, green people, the way kids do. I brought it home and taped it on the fridge, so proud I could barely stand it. My mother walked into the kitchen, looked at it, and said, "Claire, honey, the proportions are a little off. Your brother's head is much too small." I stared at that drawing for a long time. Then I took it down. My brother Drew was 2 years older, and in my mother's world, Drew was simply better at existing. He played baseball, and she went to every game. I played violin for 4 years, and she came to the recitals, but always with something else to do afterward, always checking her phone, always the first parent out the door. Here's the thing that makes it so hard to explain to people who didn't grow up this way. My mother wasn't cruel every single day. Some days she was wonderful. She taught me to make pie crust from scratch when I was 9. She stayed up until 2 in the morning helping me study for my AP chemistry exam. When my high school boyfriend broke up with me junior year, she sat on the edge of my bed and said, "He doesn't know what he's missing." And I believed her. I held on to those moments, polished them up, stored them somewhere safe. It wasn't until much later that I understood what I was actually doing. I was making a case for the defense, collecting evidence that she loved me because some part of me already suspected I needed it. The pattern got more sophisticated as I got older. The comments dressed themselves up as concern. "Oh, you're going into accounting. Are you sure that's exciting enough for you?" When I made partner track at 28, she told her book club I'd gotten lucky with a firm that didn't have many qualified applicants. I wasn't in the room when she said it. My Aunt Renee told me later, wincing like she was sorry to be the messenger. I laughed it off. That's what you do. You laugh it off because what's the alternative? Making a scene? Starting something? No. You fold the comment up, tuck it into your pocket, and add it to the collection you pretend you're not keeping. Marcus came into my life at a work conference in Chicago. He was presenting on risk management for a mid-sized nonprofit he worked with, and I was there representing my firm. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to be the most interesting person in the room. He was just present, steady, The kind of man who asks follow-up questions and actually listens to the answers. We dated for 11 months before I brought him home to Naperville. The dinner was my mother's idea. She made pot roast, set the good china, wore her hostess blouse. She was charming. She was warm. She asked Marcus questions about his family and his work with genuine seeming interest. And then, right around dessert, she turned to me and said, in front of him, "You know, Claire, I always worried you'd be too intense for most men. It's so nice to see someone with patience." Marcus set his fork down. There was a pause, a long one. Then he looked at my mother, smiled, and said, "Honestly, Mrs. Sutton, what drew me to Claire was exactly that intensity. She's the most driven person I've met." My mother gave a small, polite nod, the kind that means nothing, and steered the conversation toward property taxes in the suburb. But I saw it. The slight tightening around her eyes, the micro adjustment in her posture, because Marcus hadn't been intimidated. He hadn't laughed along. He had simply disagreed, calmly, directly, like it was the easiest thing in the world. And for my mother, that was a language she didn't have a response to. On the drive home, Marcus reached over and put his hand on mine. He said, "Hey, that comment she made, that's not okay. You know that, right?" I stared at the highway for a minute. Then I said, "She means well." He didn't push it, but he didn't agree either. And that silence, that was the first small crack. Marcus proposed on a Tuesday night. Not a big production, not a restaurant with a violinist. He made pasta, we were both in sweatpants, the TV was on in the background, and he just paused the show, turned to me and said, "I want to do this every Tuesday for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" I said yes, so fast I knocked over my water glass. We'd been married for 8 months when we found out we were pregnant, and I want you to understand I was overjoyed. Like, genuinely, deeply, tearfully happy. I called my mother first because that's what daughters do. She congratulated me. She said all the right words. I thought, maybe this is the thing. A grandchild. Maybe this finally softens something. She offered to plan the baby shower. I said yes because my mother is, I will give her this, an exceptional planner. She knows how to do a party. She sent invitations. She coordinated with my mother-in-law, Helen. She picked a beautiful venue, pastel tablecloths, little sprigs of eucalyptus everywhere. It was genuinely lovely. And then she stood up to welcome the guests. "Isn't it wonderful," she said, glass raised, "that someone finally wanted our Claire?" 40 people, laughing, clinking glasses. I sat very still. I felt Marcus's hand find my knee under the table. He squeezed once. I put my hand over his and I squeezed back. I didn't cry. I didn't make a face. I smiled because that is the autopilot of a woman who has spent 31 years learning to perform fine. But something had shifted, something deep and irreversible, like a fault line finally moving after years of pressure. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. I had a child coming, a daughter. We'd find out 2 weeks later at the anatomy scan. And I sat at that beautiful table, surrounded by pink decorations and eucalyptus, and I thought, I will not let her hear this. Not once. Not ever. The thing is, I didn't go looking for what I found. It was an accident. My mother had asked me 2 weeks after the shower if I could help her sort out some confusion with her financial records. She'd switched accounting software, and some figures weren't matching up in her personal budget spreadsheet. Nothing major, just a favor from a CPA daughter. She gave me access to her laptop while she ran errands. I was doing exactly what she asked, comparing columns, reconciling numbers, and then I opened the wrong folder, a subfolder inside her documents, labeled with my aunt's name, Renee Sutton. I thought it was a shared file Renee had sent. I clicked it. It was a collection of documents going back 6 years. Bank statements, transfer records, screenshots of wire confirmations. My mother had been quietly transferring money from a joint account she shared with my aunt, a joint account their mother, my grandmother, had set up before she died for the explicit purpose of covering Aunt Renee's medical expenses. Renee has a chronic illness. She's been managing it for over a decade, carefully on a tight budget. The account had been nearly drained, slowly, incrementally, in amounts small enough not to trigger a bank flag. Over 6 years, my mother had taken just under $60,000. I sat there for a very long time. My mother came home 40 minutes later. She called out a cheerful hello from the entryway. I heard her set down her keys. I heard her heels on the hardwood. She walked into the kitchen and looked at me, and my expression told her everything. She went very still, and then she said something I will never forget for as long as I live. She didn't deny it. She didn't explain it. She looked at me and said, "I have always been the one who held this family together. I deserved something for that." I closed the laptop, I picked up my purse, and I walked out of her house. I called Marcus from the car. I was hyperventilating. I could barely get the words out. He stayed on the phone with me the entire drive home, talking steady and calm, just there, the way he always is. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had stopped shaking. That night, after I told him everything, he asked me one question. "What do you want to do?" Not what do you think you should do, not what's the right thing. What do you want? I thought about my Aunt Renee. I thought about the year she'd had to delay a procedure because she said, and I remember this clearly, she said she just needed a few more months to get the funds together. I thought about my grandmother, who saved carefully her entire life because she wanted to make sure Renee was protected. I thought about my daughter, growing in my body, who I had already promised, silently, fiercely, that I would show her what it looks like when a woman refuses to look away from something hard. I called Renee the next morning, her voice when I told her, I can't describe it exactly. It was this long, quiet exhale, like something she'd half wondered about but talked herself out of was finally being confirmed. She said, I kept thinking I must have miscounted. I kept thinking it was my medical brain fog. She'd been blaming herself. 6 years. She'd been blaming herself. Renee made the decision about whether to pursue it legally. I want to be clear about that. I gave her the information. I organized the documentation. I walked her through exactly what she was looking at. But the choice was hers. She called her attorney. My mother received a formal legal notice 3 weeks later. And then she called me. I didn't answer the first 3 times. On the 4th call, I picked up. She spoke for about 2 minutes, in a voice I hadn't heard from her before, lower, stripped of the polish, something almost raw underneath it. She said she'd made a terrible mistake. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't want to lose me or the baby. I let her finish. Then I said, Mom, I love you, and I am going to require a lot more than a phone call. She started to respond. I said, I'm not finished. I need you to understand something. What you did to Renee, that's between you and Renee in the courts now. That's not mine to resolve. But what I need to tell you, what I've needed to say for a long time, is that the way you have spoken about me and about me to other people has caused me real harm. The comment at the shower wasn't the first. It was just the last. Silence. I'm going to need to see change. Not words. Change. Therapy. A real commitment to understanding what you've done. And I am not going to expose my daughter to the same environment I grew up in. I just won't. She was crying by the end. I felt the pull of it. That old instinct to soften things, to say it's okay, it's fine, I forgive you, let's just move on. I recognized it, and I let it pass. I told her I loved her, and I hung up. My daughter was born on a Thursday morning in early spring. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, a full head of dark hair, a cry that sounded like she had opinions from the very first second. We named her June. Marcus held her first while the nurses finished with me, and I watched him from across the room. This man who had never once made me feel like I was too much or not enough, holding our daughter like she was the most important thing he'd ever touched. And she was. She absolutely was. My mother was not in the delivery room. That was a boundary I set early, and I held it without guilt, which is something I want you to hear if you're listening. Setting a boundary with your family does not make you a bad daughter. It makes you a woman who has decided what she will and will not accept. My Aunt Renee was there. She came the next morning, brought flowers and a hand-knit blanket she'd been working on for weeks. She held June and cried in the good way, the way that means you're full, not empty. She looked at me over the top of June's little head and said, "Thank you, Claire, for seeing it." I almost lost it completely at that. It's been 14 months since the shower. Here's where things stand. Renee's civil case was settled. The terms are private, but Renee told me she feels like her mother's wishes were finally honored. That's what matters. My mother entered therapy. I know this because she told me, and because my Aunt Renee, who has known my mother for 60 years, confirmed she's actually going, not performing going, actually going. My mother and I speak on the phone once a week. The calls are careful, short. We talk about June mostly because June is safe and small and new and gives us somewhere neutral to stand while we figure out if there's ground to rebuild on. She hasn't met June in person yet. That's still something I'm working through. Marcus doesn't push me either way. He just keeps asking the only question that matters. What do you want, Claire? Some days I want my mother to meet her granddaughter and have it be uncomplicated and whole. Some days I want to protect June so fiercely that I'd wrap her in a layer of nothing but people who already know how to love correctly. Most days I'm somewhere in between, and I'm learning that somewhere in between is a real place. It's not giving up, and it's not giving in. It's just where I am right now. Here's what I want you to take from this, if you're listening. Emotional damage doesn't always come from loud, obvious places. Sometimes it comes from a sigh in the kitchen, a comment at a dinner table, a toast at a baby shower that was framed as a compliment but landed like a verdict. If the people in your life make you feel like your worth is conditional, like love is something you have to earn in increasingly complex ways, that's not love. That's a transaction, and you didn't sign up for that deal. I spent 31 years convinced I was the difficult one. Too sensitive. Too serious. Not easy enough to love the way other people seem to be easy to love. It took a man who set his fork down and refused to laugh, and a folder I was never supposed to open, to finally see the truth. The truth was never that I was hard to love. The truth was that I'd been surrounded by someone who didn't know how to love without making it about power. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. June is asleep in the next room right now as I'm recording this. She's making those little sighing sounds that babies make, the ones that are so peaceful they could break your heart wide open. And I am going to make her a promise, right here, out loud, in front of all of you. She will never sit at a table and fold herself up small so someone else can feel big. She will know, from the very beginning, that she doesn't have to earn anything from the people who are supposed to love her. And if she ever finds herself in a room where someone makes a joke at her expense and everyone laughs, she will have enough of herself to know that the problem is not her. That's the whole story. I'm not a hero. I'm just a woman who got tired of collecting evidence that she deserved to be loved. If any part of this felt familiar to you, drop a comment below. Even just the words, "I see it now." That's enough. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe. I share stories like this every week. Real women, real moments, real lines drawn in real ground. There's another one waiting for you in the description. I think it'll stay with you. I'll see you there.